Good afternoon, my friends and followers. I'm your lawyer, Patrick McGeehan, and I am your best friend at your worst time. Welcome to Law in the Life Live, and we have a special guest today, attorney Barry Stein, who does workers' compensation. I'm getting a lot of calls and a lot of emails and DMs from followers and clients who are policemen, nurses, firemen, asking what the relationship is between this virus and workers' comp. What happens if they contract coronavirus or COVID-19 while they're working as a first responder? What happens if they're not being supplied with the proper equipment and training to take preventative measures? I don't know. I don't practice that, so I brought Barry on. He's an expert in that stuff. Barry, can you tell us what happens in those circumstances? Is there any relation or is there any coverage under workers' comp for COVID-19?
It's going to be a curious conundrum to a certain extent. Let me start with state employees. The governor has issued an order that determines that first responders who work for the state, that would be, healthcare providers that work for the state, are presumed to have contracted it within the course and scope of employment, and they would be covered. The problem is that everybody else would be covered by the state workers' compensation statute. And the way the statute is written with regard to occupational diseases, it requires epidemiologic studies. It requires the medical profession to have studied this and given a relationship between work and contracting the particular disease. And those studies don't exist yet. They won't exist for 1.5 to 2 years. So in all likelihood, a lot of workers' comp cases are going to be denied, and the care and treatment are going to be denied. And the other question you ask about, PPE, personal protective equipment, is significant because a lot of employers are not providing the equipment that's needed. And if an individual contracts it and they're not covered by comp, our thought is that they are, in fact, entitled to pursue a third-party claim.
Very, very interesting. So under that law that the governor signed, that's only covering state employees. So it may cover a state trooper, but it wouldn't cover a deputy sheriff or city police officer?
Correct. And it's a question mark as to whether it actually covers the state trooper or not. But first responder. So if there was God, I can't even think. The people first on the scene, if it was a state employee, they would be covered. A state hospital, the medical professionals within the state hospital, they would be covered. Definitely not a city or county first responders, even though they're facing the same dangers.
Okay, so the law only covers medical personnel and not all state employees?
Yeah, no, it's limited to first responders and healthcare providers. That's it.
Okay.
Not all state employees.
I got you. So that's going to be interesting for sure. I mean, so you could get coverage for somebody who's an employee in a state-run hospital that's a first responder working in the ER of a state-run hospital, for example, but somebody in, say, Baptist hospital is not going to get covered under the same law.
Exactly. And I think that you're going to see that there are going to be lawsuits filed because people are upset. And let's face it, young people have lost their lives. And there are significant damages, when a young family member who has children and a spouse is no longer around. Those claims are significant, and they're going to be attractive, unfortunately, for everybody to try to consider. And remember, this is not going to shake itself out quickly.
How long do you think it's going to get to where we're able to, and I realize this is just a prediction based on your experience, how long do you think it would take to straighten that out and straighten this area of law out? To me, it seems like it's going to be years and years and years.
I mean, I tend to agree with you that it's going to be years, unless the legislature comes out with some sort of act that redefines occupational disease and somehow covers COVID-19 and the treatment. Remember, the vast majority of people who get COVID-19 need treatment, and that treatment may last for weeks, and they may feel bad, but after that, they probably are going to be okay. And so the vast majority of people have a limited exposure in terms of medical and a limited exposure in terms of lost wages. Now, there are people who have to go on life support, et cetera. Those bills are going to be huge. And if they're covered by group health, then there's only going to be co-pays and deductibles that apply. So again, the vast majority of people who get exposed and have disease can get treated and they'll be fine and nothing goes on past that. They're not going to need anything later. It's the people who have significant debilitating problems and it affects their future life and or they die as a result of the exposure and the disease.
Wow, very interesting. I know we spoke last week and I was asking you some questions before we set up the podcast. And I had told you that I gotten some calls from a couple people who were afraid to go to work. Afraid, they were first responders. They were afraid to go to work and they're asking me, do I have to go to work if I'm not being provided the proper equipment or if I could contract COVID-19 from my job? And basically they were afraid. And can you address that again here?
Yeah, as I explained to you, it's a very difficult circumstance. First, most of that issue is not within workers' comp. It's within labor law. But I've had to deal with it too, because I've had those phone calls and there's a variety of realities too. There are people who work within hospitals who want to use their own PPE, their own equipment, which the hospital's not providing. And there are actually rules within the hospital setting that say they can't do that. So they have to put themselves at risk simply by being there, even though they have the equipment on their own, which is a very strange reality. And these are all labor issues. And frankly, if somebody is concerned and certainly doesn't have PPE, they need to talk to a labor attorney to make sure what they can do in the setting that they're in, depending upon the work that they're doing.
Okay, so somebody came to you with a question, or I referred somebody to you for the question that pertained to that. Would you be able to refer them to an employment lawyer or a labor lawyer?
Yeah, we'd have a discussion about the circumstances of their hiring. Do they have a contract, a written contract or not? If they do, we would need to review that. If they don't, then probably I would refer them right out to the labor attorney in order to be able to explore the concept of, are they providing PPE, are they not? If they are providing equipment, is it appropriate? Is there appropriate equipment? I actually had a conversation with a physician who's starting a new job, and she's very concerned about whether or not PPE is going to be provided. She's also concerned whether her patients are going to be able to get appropriate treatment and ventilators, et cetera, when needed. And she doesn't want to be there if that's what's going to happen. So the discussion is ongoing. I think it needs to be up front, and direct. So I think that's part of the recommendation that I'm making to people is bring it to the forefront. Don't bring yourself there and have a problem while you're standing on the hospital floor or you're at the police station and going out on an emergency call or whatever. Bring it up beforehand and then try to deal with it so that everybody, at least in some way, is satisfied with the response. Not going to be easy stuff.
No, I don't think it's going to be easy at all. And I think it's going to take a long time, not only to straighten out, the legal issues, but I just think to straighten out the logistics and everything related to this and getting it back up and running in the case, now some people were saying that it could reappear in the fall. And I think it's just going to be something that's long-term before it gets straightened out, 100%.
It is not straightening out quickly. Never.
No, not at all. I mean, we can't even get it straightened out with the courts quickly. Is there anything else, any other information or advice you can give my viewers and followers about working and, the COVID-19 situation?
Yeah, two things that I would want everybody to remember. One is, if they have an issue or a question or a problem, don't sit around debating it. Call somebody who really knows what they're talking about. Call somebody who has the knowledge in that particular area in order to assist you. And two, I think the protection around is really important and people need to pay attention to it. It's not just, there are protests going on all over about not wanting everybody to control us, et cetera. I understand that, but the reality of it is that this disease is airborne and transmits from individual based upon, spit and contact. So we really need to be aware of that and pay attention to it.
Yeah, certainly need to take all precautions possible. Have you been following any of the issues that are going on with the Broward County Sheriff's Office between the sheriff and the union, where the union's saying that the deputies aren't getting the proper equipment to protect themselves?
No, I'm not, but it's very similar to the healthcare provider I told you about.
Yeah.
You know, and the healthcare provider has a warehouse on her own of you know, N95 masks and other equipment, and the question is whether or not the hospital is going to allow you know, her to use that equipment on her own. There's actually a hospital in Broward that will not allow the healthcare providers within the hospital to walk around with an N95 mask that prevents them from you know, contracting other people's you know, atmospheric problems.
Right.
Because the rule in the hospital is you can't walk around with protective equipment on while you're walking in the hallway.
Yeah, we had that problem when I was a policeman. You could only use county issued equipment, and if you had your own personal equipment that was better, you couldn't use it unless you got approval from, you know, the gods above in the ivory towers. All right, Barry, I appreciate it. Tell everybody where they can reach you, where they can contact you, where your office is.
Yeah, we're obviously mostly working remotely, but my office is downtown. We're at 25 Southeast 2nd Avenue, Suite 425. The phone number is operational, 305-377-1505. And they can reach me by email, B Stein, Stein, at DCFSZ. D as in dog, C as in Charlie, F as in Frank, S as in Stein, Z as in zebra.com. And we're open, operational, and available to help.
Very good. There you have it, folks, from Barry Stein, workers' comp attorney, giving you some very good information about work and the COVID-19 coronavirus situation, a few predictions, and just very good information. I hope that answered a lot of the questions that I got from my users and followers through DMs and emails. Remember, if you have any other questions we didn't address, or you have any further questions, feel free to DM me, email me, any of the platforms, and I'll either get Barry back on or refer him to Barry or refer you to Barry if you don't call him yourself. But remember, if you have any type of workers' comp situation, you get injured at work, you need to call Barry and get Barry on the job right away. Thanks, Barry. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on Law on the Life Live. We've certainly enjoyed it.
Thanks, Patrick. I really appreciate everything that you do. I follow you consistently.
Thanks, brother.